Welcome to 95.9 The Hawk, the podcast. Today, I'm here with Mr. Will Seaton, everybody. Woo! Let's give it up for Will. I'll tell you why we have Will here in a moment.
Yeah.
The podcast today is all about the top 5 best 80s hair bands.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you right there. Top 5, that's a tough thing, bro. I mean, think about this. There are so many bands that came out of the 80s that fall into the hard rock, glam rock, hair metal band thing, and I'm going to try to do my best to keep it to 5. I know we talked about doing a couple honorable mentions and stuff like that. I'm going to do my damnedest to keep it to a respectable number.
Well, I can tell you, in preparing for this, Will actually texted me and said, can we do top 10?
Well, okay, here's the reason. So I grew up, and I think the reason that I liked doing this podcast, or the idea of doing this podcast with you, is I grew up in that era. I was born in 75. When all that music started to get big, it was elementary school and junior high and high school for me. So everybody was listening to that sort of music. That was top 40 music. I mean, you think about Planet 105.1 and Taylor Swift and all those bands that are on that. In the mid 80s to early 90s, your top 40 was Poison and Motley Crue, mixed in with Duran Duran and Madonna and all that sort of stuff. So I was listening to that from such an early age, So I think I can speak a little bit with passion on it because I grew up in that generation,
Another reason I wanted to have you on this particular subject was because, you grew up in the era, but you also grew up in Southern California.
I did.
Which is kind of the epicenter of hair bands.
The Sunset Strip era. Now, when I started going to the Sunset Strip, I was 15 years old. It was 1990, so a lot of those bands had already had their heyday. So I was honestly, I didn't see those bands play a lot at like the Whiskey and the Roxy, but I saw them sitting there in booths, like listening to newer bands. Like I remember seeing Billy Idol. I remember seeing members of Poison, Steven Adler from Guns N' Roses, Nikki Sixx, just sort of like being at these clubs listening to newer bands. If I was there 5 years earlier, I would have been able to hear Poison on stage and stuff like that. But I mean, I think that hard rock, got its start in the 70s. And without like 70s bands, there wouldn't be that 80s rock that we're so used to. And in watching the podcast you did last week with Grady on the guitar players, he kind of qualified what he thought brought a good guitar player. And for me, I think for a good glam band or hard rock band, whatever you want to call them, first thing is showmanship and songwriting. And I think if you go back to the 70s, nobody did that better than Mick Jagger and Keith Richards from the Stones, Robert Plant and Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin, and Steven Tyler and Joe Perry from Aerosmith. I think without those bands, a lot of that swagger that 80s bands had it wouldn't exist. So I think showmanship and songwriting is the first key thing for a good hard rock band. Secondly, you got to have riffs. And if you think about riffs, dating back to the 70s, you got Black Sabbath and AC/DC. You hear the Iron Man or Highway to Hell, and you just know who it is, Then I think theatrics. If you think of the 80s, theatrics were huge, and that started in the 70s with like Kiss and Alice Cooper, makeup and flying through the stage and fireworks and fire on stage. And then fourth is just sort of like that whole kind of glam style and like melodies and harmonies. And if you think about it, Queen, if you look at Axl Rose playing piano on a lot of these videos in the late 80s, early 90s, he's doing Freddie Mercury sort of stuff, So those are the things that I thought of, the melodies, the riffs, the theatrics, and the showmanship. That to me makes what would make a top tier hair metal band versus a bottom tier, which I won't bring up.
This is exactly why I had Will come and talk about the top 5 best 80s hair bands of all time, because I knew he was knowledgeable about it and really excited about it.
I'm definitely excited about it.
Me, I just, they had big hair and they had great songs, and I remember them from when I was younger.
Okay.
So we're gonna do 2 honorable mentions, and then we're going to do our top 5. I'll let you go first on your honorable mentions.
Honorable mentions is a hard one because, dude, I was listening to them this morning, actually. I just had a playlist going. Warrant was great for a little bit of time. Warrant and Skid Row, to me, were the very tail end of that. Like, they came out in, 89 or 90. They each had a couple great albums, and then they sort of just faded into obscurity, different lineup changes and stuff like that. And the same could be said for like my true honorable mention right here, which is Rat. I think Rat, when I started listening to music, and especially like on MTV, Rat was huge. They started with Round and Round and Out of the Cellar, but if you watched MTV in the 80s, they had a constant presence from all of their albums, and all of them went multi-platinum or whatever. And I never really gave Rat a shot until the end of the 80s. I happened to go to a record store out in LA, and I was just looking to buy a new CD, and I saw that Rat had a greatest hits out. It was called Rat and Roll 8191. And I looked at the back, I'm like, okay, Round and Round, Lay It Down. I know those two songs. So I bought it. It was like cheap. It was like $10. I put it on, and I didn't realize until I put it on, I knew every single song on that CD. I just didn't know it was Rat.
Oh, okay.
Just from like listening to the radio and watching MTV and stuff, I'm like, oh, that's Rat. And the entire CD was a great listen because it was just it was something I didn't realize how much I knew from that band.
Okay.
But what's your first honorable mention?
My first, mine are going to be quick. Stuff I like. Whitesnake was my first honorable mention.
Okay. And why?
I mean, massive ballads. Mm-hmm. Guitars like Slow and Easy and things like that. Those 6-minute songs that were just blow your face off. Mm-hmm. Again, they sort of had a prodigious rise, and then
it was they were big for one album, and they were huge for that album, and then they sort of just tapered off.
Kind of went away.
Okay, so my other honorable mention, this is going to be kind of a weird one to put in the honorable mention category. Okay. Because I think a lot of people are going to have them higher. It's Poison.
Wow.
And I'll tell you why.
Poison as an honorable mention. No, you tell me why,
I'm
Will.
I'll tell you why. Okay, Poison was great, and I love Poison. Don't get me wrong. They had 3 huge albums, but it was a quick career. It was like 86 to 91. They had 3 albums, a bunch of top 10 hits, great videos, great shows. I saw Poison open up for Def Leppard and Motley just a couple years ago on the stadium tour, and to be honest with you, they were better than Motley at the time, and they were almost as good as Def Leppard. So they still had that great thing, but if you ever go see them, it's the same 10 songs over and over again. So
what's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with it, but if you're gonna pay $200 for a concert ticket,
that's true.
So
okay, all right.
Those were my honorable mentions: Rat and Poison. Poison almost made the top 5, but once I get into my top 5, you'll see why they didn't.
Okay.
But your second honorable.
My second honorable mention is Cinderella.
Oh, okay.
I love Tom Kiefer's voice. Like Gypsy Road, Don't Know What You Got Till It's Gone. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have like a bluesy aspect, but yet they were still an 80s hair band. Mm-hmm. And I just, And
he had that distinctive voice. It was like a combo of AC/DC and Guns N' Roses, that raspy, where, like, let's say Skid Row was a very, clean voice. Yeah. Tom Kiefer had a very dirty voice, but it worked for Cinderella.
It really did. So there you go. There's our honorable mentions. Let's get to the top 5 80s hair bands of all time.
Here's the thing. So with this list, Poison would have been higher on my personal list, but I tried to look at this objectively. Okay, so my number 5, I don't love this band, but I like them, but you cannot deny how big Bon Jovi was in the 80s. They came out in 84 with Runaway, which was a huge hit, and the second album didn't do much, but when the third album, Slippery When Wet, came out, it was this top 40 mass appeal. No matter if you were listening to AC/DC or Debbie Gibson, you had the Bon Jovi album, Slippery When Wet, and that translated into New Jersey. Both of those albums were just, I think they each sold over 10 million copies apiece. Then when the 90s happened, they kind of changed their style a little bit. They had some rock, a lot more ballads. They even released a country album like 15 years ago or something like that.
But, we won't talk so much about recent Bon Jovi.
No, but I think those 2 Bon Jovi albums in the 80s made them absolutely huge. And again, I like them. I don't love them, but there's no denying how huge that band was back in the day.
Okay, and my number 5, I think you're probably going to have higher on your list, but there's a reason why. My number 5 is actually Guns N' Roses.
Okay.
Because we're talking about 80s hair bands, and to me, Guns N' Roses, they eked their way into the 90s with the Use Your Illusion double albums, and that wasn't so 80s hair bandish. For me, Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction, maybe the greatest debut album of all time. And I remember being like 12 years old and a buddy of mine bringing the cassette in, and we actually opened up the cassette and the art on the inside. I was like, what is
crazy.
this? This is amazing. And then the music was amazing. And but for me, they're number 5, 80s hair band.
And see, I'm going to translate that into my number 4, which was Guns N' Roses.
Guns N' Roses, okay.
And I'll tell you why. The exact same reason. Bon Jovi might have been a bigger hair band per se, but Guns N' Roses, especially growing up in Los Angeles, they were the pinnacle of that. They were the last, really, in my opinion, huge band to come out of that scene. If you're looking at the Welcome to the Jungle video, he looks like a member of Poison in that video. He's teased up hair. Half the guys are wearing makeup in that video, and I think then they translated into Sweet Child of Mine and Paradise City, and they had more of a grittier look. But you're absolutely right. Appetite and their second album, GNR Lies, both came out in the 80s. They were huge. To me, they're one of my favorite bands, period. But when I talk about just 80s and hair metal and whatever, I got to put them a little bit lower than my top 3 bands. But personally, I think that the Illusion albums were great. They weren't as good as Appetite and Lies, and that's why I kind of have them at the 4 position. Because you're right, they came out at the tail end of the genre, and they released those 2 80s albums, which were great. But they didn't have as many as, let's say, the people on my top 3.
Yeah, for me, I would say Guns N' Roses, like maybe one of the best hard rock bands of all time, best 80s hair band.
And so that's why I had mine as hair metal, hard rock.
All right, and my number 4 is actually Def Leppard.
Okay.
Similar-ish reasons. I think of 80s hair bands. I don't always initially think of Def Leppard.
Yeah.
I just think of them as a great rock band / pop band even, because, I mean, you want to talk a band that had huge pop hits in the 80s? Oh, my gosh. I mean, you come out with Pyromania, and then Pyromania.
So the first album was High and Dry. The second one was Pyromania. And the third one was Hysteria,
so
in that order.
You think of like a band, you release Pyromania, that could be your pinnacle.
Oh, yeah.
And then they one-up it even more so with Hysteria.
Yeah.
I mean, geez. I mean, Def Leppard.
So funny enough, so your number 4 is my number 3.
Okay.
So Def Leppard. we'll keep on talking about Def Leppard. So you're absolutely right. They are a hard rock band, but if you listen to Hysteria, it's rock, but it's definitely a poppy album. You have the Love Bites and Armageddon It and Animal, all great songs that could easily translate into a pop audience. And I saw an interview with Joe Elliott years ago, the lead singer, and he was talking to MTV, and he's like, I don't want to be pigeonholed into being a metal band. He's like, I would rather you think of us more as Duran Duran than Black Sabbath.
Wow.
Just because that's where the mass appeal was in the
absolutely.
80s, But, dude, Pyromania and Hysteria, that's a 1-2 punch. And I personally like Hysteria a little bit more. I know that other people like... But Photograph is my favorite song by them, which is on Pyromania. But Hysteria is start to finish, kind of like Appetite for Destruction. There's not a bad song on the CD.
What was their album after Hysteria?
Okay, so that was Adrenalized in '92, which still sold for being in the middle.
We were so excited for that album to come out.
Yeah.
And what was the first thing?
Let's Get Rocked.
Let's Get Rocked.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
You would figure that album would tank coming out in '92 against Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden. That album still sold like 5 million copies.
It was like a pop rock album.
It was a pop rock album.
Yeah,
and
no one
people
cared.
Still love. Well, no. I mean, 5 million people cared. You know.
All right. Well, I meant no one cared that it wasn't like a grungy thing.
Absolutely not.
Everyone was still excited.
Let's see if your number 3 is my number 2. If we're going in the same direction.
My number 3 is Bon Jovi.
Oh, okay. So let's go back to Bon Jovi.
Yeah. So again, all the reasons you stated as well, I would put them a little bit higher on the list. I think they lose some of their 80s hair band luster because they're still putting out new music to this day. And they actually had some like It's My Life in the early 2000s,
which is still 26 years ago now.
Which was kind of a big hit.
It was a huge hit. I remember being somewhere. It was Universal City Walk out in California, and they had a big screen playing music videos at the time. And it was like whatever was big at the time, Britney Spears and the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. And I remember walking through there and looking up at the screen. I hadn't even heard It's My Life yet. And it's playing. I'm looking up. I'm like, I know that voice. Why do I know that voice? And I'm looking up, and it's Bon Jovi with a little bit of a shorter haircut. And I'm like, this is a pretty decent song. And then it just blew up. It was all over radio.
It was all over the place.
And again, Bon Jovi's great. It's just I think their best work was in the 80s and maybe early 90s. And that's why they weren't a little bit higher on my list.
So what's your number 2?
No, it's your turn, isn't it? Oh, no, is it?
I just did number 3, Bon Jovi.
Okay, my number 2 is Motley Crue. And I would fit...
I'm just going to say right now, my number 2 is also Motley Crue.
Okay, so let's talk about Motley. Okay, so... if you want to talk about a band that was there from the big,
I want to know who's number 1 then.
Okay,
well,
I'm curious about your number 1.
If you're number 2,
we've already done Guns, Def Leppard, Bon Jovi. Oh, I know who your number 1 is then. Okay, so
I don't know who your number 1 is. Sorry, number 2 is Motley Crue.
Okay, so let's talk about Motley. They started at the beginning of this whole, call it the Decade of Decadence. They called it that. That's where there's the greatest hits album. They were there from 81 all the way to 91. And the thing with Motley Crue, and that's why they're so higher on my list over Def Leppard and over Bon Jovi and Guns N' Roses, is consistency. Motley Crue had 5 multi-platinum albums back to back to back from 81 to 89. Too Fast for Love was great. Shout at the Devil was even better. It sold more. Theater of Pain then had their hugest ballad of Home Sweet Home. Then they abandoned the glam rock look for Girls, 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 and they have just this gritty biker look. That's a huge album with 2 massive singles that you still hear at every football event, every baseball, you hear Wild Side and Girls, Girls, Girls. When teams take the field, they end it in 89 with Dr. Feelgood, their hugest selling album with probably their biggest hits. 5 huge MTV videos. You had Dr. Feelgood, Kickstart My Heart, Without You, Don't Go Away Mad, and Same Old Situation. Any of those videos...
How was it not number 1 then?
It was number 1. It was
number 1 for you and I on our list.
I'll tell you in a minute.
Okay, I'm going to tell you in a minute as well.
And the only reason I would love to have put Motley at number 1, but it seems like right when they got rid of Vince Neil at the end of the beginning of the 90s, then there was like lineup changes completely, and then they would release an album that was not that great, and they would get back together for tours and release a couple good songs here and there, but even now it's like 3 of the 4 members, and Vince doesn't sound as good as Vince used to.
Yeah.
But man, in that 10-year period from 81 to 91, it was hard for any band to touch Motley Crue. If you're going out on tour and Guns N' Roses is your opening act, Motley Crue was huge. But tell me why Motley's number 2 for you.
Well, for me, it's just they defined the 80s in general.
They did.
I mean, and what I loved about them is it was partying, it was rock and roll, and it was women.
Yeah.
Unapologetic.
No.
We're here to party, we're here to jam out, and we want to make out with a bunch of chicks.
You know what was great about Motley too is they consistently changed their style. Like the first 2 albums, especially Shout at the Devil, they looked like they wanted to be Kiss. They had all the makeup and the outfits. Theater of Pain, it was completely pink and glam. And then you got to Girls and Dr. Feelgood, and they just looked like rockers.
Yep.
It's even hard to pigeonhole Motley or Guns N' Roses in the hair metal category because I think by the end of the 80s, they were just a true hard rock band, which gets me to number 1.
Let's hear your number 1.
Okay. And this is going to be a wild take, but I really believe...
I can't wait.
No, I will tell you why it's this band. Without this band, there is no Motley Crue, Poison, Guns N' Roses. The best hard rock hair band of the 80s is Van Halen.
Oh! I didn't even have them on my list!
How do you not... let's go back in time, okay?
Wow!
You think about your 80s frontman. Think about your Vince Neil, your Bret Michaels, your anybody. They don't exist without David Lee Roth. End of story. David Lee Roth had the big teased out blonde hair, the spandex pants. You go, and a great voice in the 80s, a screamer. Then you go to guitar. You don't have Slashes and CeCe DeVille's and all that without them trying to imitate Eddie Van Halen. You want to talk about harmonies like I talked about? Michael Anthony and Alex Van Halen, they had 6 albums with Roth, back to back to back. You're on the Hawk. How often is Van Halen played?
Oh, we play, as maybe our most played band.
You tell me Ain't Talking About Love, Panama, Hot for Teacher, those are great arena hard rock songs. Now, let's go to the later part of the 80s when metal changed into more of a ballady, Cinderella, Don't Know What You Got Till It's Gone, Home Sweet Home type of, vibe. They replace Roth with Hagar, and Hagar's biggest hits were the ballads. Why can't, or How Do I Know When It's Love, Love Walks In, Right Now, Dreams, all of these ballady type rock songs. And then plus they still have the great rock songs like Pound Cake and what was the big one off 5150? It was Why Can't This Be Love?
Yep.
Hagar, I swear, had love in every single one of his.
He loved love, man.
He loved love, But I will tell you, I don't think that you have as much of these Poisons and Warrants and Skid Rows without David Lee Roth and Van Halen.
Some of the synchronized on-stage movements as well. I mean, he kind of pulled Eddie and those guys into doing that because that was his whole thing.
Go look at a Warrant video. That they're doing that in the videos.
Yeah.
You look at any Poison video, Bret Michaels is doing David Lee Roth.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, to me...
I wouldn't have... I completely whiffed on Van Halen because I just consider them one of the greatest rock bands.
They are the greatest rock band, but again, and that's why I preface my list with its 80s hard rock hair metal. You notice I didn't put Metallica or Judas Priest or Iron Maiden.
AC/DC or any of those.
All those 70s bands like Kiss and AC/DC and Aerosmith, they had huge, call it glam metal, hair metal albums in the 80s. I mean, if you think about for Aerosmith, Permanent Vacation, Dude Looks Like a Lady, that's a glam rock album. Kiss, all their albums in the 80s were, Lick It Up and Crazy Nights. Those are glam rock albums. Even AC/DC and Ozzy released, Shot in the Dark, Ultimate Sin. That's a glam rock album, So all those bands kind of morphed into that in the 80s. But I'm sorry, I think that without Van Halen, you don't have any of that.
Okay.
That's why Van Halen, in my opinion, is the best hard rock, glam rock, hair metal, whatever of the 80s.
All right. Great choice. My number one is Poison.
I knew it.
Because when
I looked at it.
When I think of 80s hair bands, I go directly to thinking of Poison in that moment. If you go back and you watch the video for Every Rose Has Its Thorn, it almost makes somebody my age emotional.
Sure.
Like you go back and you go, oh man, I missed that time.
Oh dude, I missed that time.
And it's just like a concert footage.
Yeah,
and
it's
stuff.
A great video.
It's just like, oh my gosh,
and if you look
good.
at the Poison videos, like for Nothing But a Good Time and Fallen Angel, it's the band and there's this huge stage and they're running around. It brings you back to that time.
Yep.
And that's why it was hard for me to put Poison at number 5. But if you look at it, Van Halen, Motley, Def Leppard, Guns, and Bon Jovi, those were bands that were a little bit bigger than Poison, but that's why 5 is such a hard number for. Think about who we didn't talk about: Twisted Sister, Quiet Riot, Dokken, Skid Row.
I'll say the guys on your shirt. You got Skid Row.
And then there was all the white bands: Great White, White Lion, White Snake. I know you did mention White Snake as your honorable mention. All these bands, and then even in the 90s, you had Slaughter and Extreme and all the kind of tail end of that stuff.
And then, you get the crazy ones like Vixen and those kind of bands.
Lita Ford.
Yeah.
Well, Lita Ford and Joan Jett were good too. But they started in the 70s. It's hard to pinpoint 5 when there was an entire decade where all these bands were so big. And this is completely, I think, subjective.
100%.
It's like somebody's going to be watching this like, why is Great White not the number 1 band right now?
I loved White Lion.
I loved White. And you know what, White Lion? That first White Lion album was great.
Pretty great, yeah.
But I think between our lists, even with the honorable mentions of Skid Row, Rat and Cinderella and Whitesnake, and I think you really have at that point the 10 biggest bands of the 80s.
All right,
you know?
there we go. All right, Will Seaton, thanks for joining me on 95.9 The Hawk podcast and counting down the top 5 best 80s hair bands of all time. Thanks for watching.
But wait a minute. What's your opinion?
Yeah. You're right.
I know. Look, you're going to put this on YouTube. You're going to get some people that say, forget that guy. I was going to say something else. Forget that guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Van Halen and Guns N' Roses were not hair metal. The best ones are Warrant and Skid Row. You know?
Comment below on YouTube, and we'd love to hear from you.
And also, request some of these songs on the Hawk. Make this guy play. You know what?
I'd love to. Come on.
We need more,
well, you know
diversity.
What I forgot? Tesla. What? I love Tesla.
Tesla's great.
Yeah.
Tesla's another one that was
underrated.
like, I don't know if they ever wore makeup. I thought Tesla and the Black Crows, they kind of fall into that category, but I don't think either one of them ever wore makeup.
I don't think so either.
But they dude, if you watch the Headbangers Ball back in the 80s and 90s, they were there.
Yeah.
You know?
All right. There you go. So we'd love to hear from you as well. And Will, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.